This video is brought to you by Straightgoods News, Canada's alternative online news source. Visit Straightgoods.ca.
Good day, my name is Pat Martin, NDP member for Winnipeg Centre, and I'm joined today with my colleague François Lapointe, and we're here to introduce to you Margaret Buist. Let me just say, by prefacing Margaret's remarks, that asbestos, we now know, is the greatest industrial killer the world has ever known, and more Canadians now die from asbestos than all other industrial and occupational causes combined. And yet Canada continues to be one of the largest producers and exporters of asbestos in the world. We have been very critical of this and very publicly criticizing the government for continuing to spend millions of dollars subsidizing the asbestos industry, and a number of recent events have brought this to the forefront once again. First, the only study that the Government of Canada has hung its hat on in defense of the asbestos industry and their policy at McGill University has been called into question. We believe it's been exposed as a fraudulent document. Second, in Italy, there's been a landmark precedent-setting conviction of the asbestos industry principals, charged, tried, and convicted and sentenced to 16 years in prison, plus 35,000 euros for each victim in that case. We believe in the NDP that the asbestos industry is vulnerable and could be and should be subject to not only massive class action suits but criminal charges as well, in light of what we now know. The reason Mrs. Buist is with us today is that her husband is a victim of the asbestos industry, and I'm going to let her talk about the postcard campaign that she initiated at her own expense to draw attention to the public's opinion of Canada's policy on asbestos. Margaret.
Thank you. This is my husband, Harry. Harry was diagnosed in February of 1994 and died from mesothelioma in March of 1996. He was very strong emotionally and physically, and it's his strength that has allowed me to continue all these years. 16 years I have been fighting with the labour movement and the Occupational Health Centre Clinic for Ontario Workers. I'm on the local advisory board for them, and my husband just felt he knew that he couldn't help himself, but he wanted to help prevent anybody new in the workplace from being exposed. And unfortunately, these exposures are still happening. They're not as frequent as they were, but they are still happening. My grandson, who is now 16, when he was 7, his sister was talking about Granddad dying. He got old and died. And David immediately said, Granddad did not get old and died. Granddad went to work and got asbestos, and then he died. My grandchildren come to meetings with me if I'm looking after them, and they colour or whatever, and so they know. I really hope I've grown up some safe workers for the future.
Show them your postcard campaign.
Yes. This is the postcard campaign. It's a continuation of a campaign that was started in Sarnia by two sisters whose father also died of mesothelioma. Her postcards went to the Prime Minister and to Joe Oliver. And after we had this very successful walk, I didn't want to lose any traction in our fight, because Quebec announced that they were delaying the announcement of the $58 million to reopen the asbestos mines till Christmas time. Now, since then, it's been delayed and delayed, and now I really hope there's going to be delayed forever. It's not going to happen.
Let's show them the volume of that. Here's some of the cards that have been sent to my office, but they're addressed to Premier Charest.
Yes, these are directed to Charest, and we have been hoping to be able to take these down to Quebec City to him, but we have not yet heard back from his office that it's convenient. So hopefully he'll see us on television and he will not give this man all this money.
Summary, I used to work in the asbestos mines, and the mines that I worked in and all of the other asbestos mines in the country closed due to normal market forces. And if the government stopped handing out corporate handouts to this mine, it would close too. So the message of this campaign is to stop supporting a killer industry, let the industry die a natural death, and use that money for other economic development in the region to help those workers transition, to help the region transition out of this deadly, dying industry. Margaret, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yes, I would like to add that we had an international conference held here in Ottawa in 2003, and that was in September. And in October, my brother-in-law, my husband's brother, also died from mesothelioma.
You're kidding.
And
I didn't know that.
It was a terrible, terrible shock that we had gone through this with Harry and now Jim. But he was diagnosed and he died within a few days of the diagnosis. So this is really super important.
Also, if I could add, you also have to consider the liability. I mean, Howard Pawley, the former Premier of Manitoba, is now a professor at the University of Windsor, and he cautions provincial and federal government that they are walking into a liability for class action lawsuits because we now know that they've known the truth about asbestos for 30, 40, 50 years, and they've been relying on fraudulent, fake junk science, and that's been exposed. They should get their butts sued off, and criminal charges, frankly. We went to great lengths to change the criminal code called the Westray Bill, where now, when corporate negligence leads to death in the workplace, it's not just a health and safety violation, it's murder. It's criminal manslaughter in the criminal code. And anybody that invests in the asbestos industry now has got to be insane.
Christy Kirkup, Sun Media.
My question is for you, Margaret. I was wondering if you could just maybe take us back a bit to when you first heard about your husband's health struggle and just how that news, affected and impacted your family.
Dr. Ahmed in London told us that he was 99% sure that Harry had mesothelioma, even without having done specific testing. He went away to arrange for my husband to be admitted to the hospital, and my husband sat in the chair, and I went over by the window, and the tears were coming down my eyes, and my husband said to me, "Are you grieving?" And I said, "A bit." And he said, "Well, I'm going to live as long as I can, as good as I can, and we'll just take it from here." So that's how he took it. He was very emotionally strong. He supported a lot of other people, like workers, other workers. He would talk to them about planning for their wives' futures should they become sick. And he just, we held each other up. When I cried, he didn't. And if he cried, I didn't.
Where was he exposed, Margaret? Where was he exposed to asbestos?
My husband worked at Imperial Oil. During his illness, I had phoned Health Canada, And I was given a name of somebody at Health Canada who was supposed to be an asbestos expert, who said to me, oh, I didn't know they had any asbestos mines in Lambton County. And I said, well, we don't. Well, she said, how would your husband get exposed? I said, because Shell Oil, Sunoco, Petro-Canada, Imperial Oil, they all use asbestos. Oh, so she put me through to somebody else who said, oh yes, Sarnia Lambton is a hotspot for mesothelioma. And this was the first person, and he was out of town. Like nobody, I couldn't find anybody in Sarnia who was willing to stand up with me and say, this is a problem in this town. And it's been quite a fight, but with the occupational health clinic, we've really come a long way, and the unions are very much on side with us. You know, I realise that jobs are at risk, but their lives are at risk, and I don't understand why they don't get this. They get this all over the world, but not in Canada, where we have safe asbestos.
It's about 350 jobs remaining. Mines open and mines close. It's life of being a miner. That's why you always save your first paycheck, because you know you're going to have to move sooner or later. That's your travel stake. This mine is actually, one is bankrupt and one is closed because it needs a new vein. It's running low on ore. It needs this $58 million handout from the Charest government to reopen. Margaret said it best, you're not doing anybody any favor, frankly, by saving their job in an asbestos mine, because asbestos kills. All asbestos kills. Quebec asbestos kills. And so use that money for economic development in some other transition work in the riding to, or in the region to get people out of the asbestos industry. Plus, you know, it's a bad investment. The world has woken up to asbestos, as Margaret says. Nobody's going to buy this stuff anymore. I mean, there's a movement in India to stop accepting Canadian asbestos. You know, there's an irrational affinity for asbestos in this country. We're the world's #1 cheerleaders for the asbestos industry. And it's an embarrassment to me. And most ordinary Canadians who sign postcards like this agree. We should have nothing to do with this industry. We're an international pariah for our policy on asbestos. It's morally and ethically reprehensible. And believe me, if reason, and it has nothing to do with reason or logic or economics or even science, it has something to do with some bizarre loyalty to the asbestos industry. As I say, the mines that I worked in closed due to normal market forces because nobody would buy this crap anymore. For some reason, those mines in the asbestos region of Quebec have had tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of corporate welfare. I call it corporate welfare for corporate serial killers.
Yeah, and the other thing is this job business. When the federal government shut down the fisheries industry, they had this program. It's called Just Transition. Mm-hmm. And this is available for the miners. And we're not talking as many. So it wouldn't cost as much. You know, if you can put all those people in the Newfoundland and Nova Scotia out of work from the fishing, if you can cope with that amount of job displacement with Just Transition, even a few years ago there were only 1,500 miners in that industry. They could have had a whole bunch of money from Just Transition and it would have all been finished.
Or you have some?
How many postcards did you mail?
I ordered 4,000 and I might have a couple of hundred left.
Okay.
And they were addressed to me just because it's free to mail to a member of Parliament. So, but we've got many hundreds here. So this was all at Margaret's own expense and own initiative. We didn't even know about it until the cards started coming to our office. So I think the general public has woken up to asbestos, and Margaret and all these good people are a good example. The jig is up for the asbestos industry. There's no business shoveling more corporate handouts to them.
In the Toronto Star a few years ago, they interviewed somebody who called himself the Asbestos King. He was a lawyer, and he started this Asbestos Institute.
Oh, yeah.
And he said that it was legal, and he was going to do it.
That's the problem.
And he was making a lot of money, and he was quite proud of it. And if anybody needed a frying pan taken up the side of his head, it was him.
Mike Lecuteur, Global TV.
Mr. Martin, you were saying that there's a $58 million handout from Quebec to keep the mine open, I believe. What's Canada's contribution to the asbestos industry?
Well, it's been constant and ongoing in both hard and soft money. And we believe, a lot of the economic development money given out by the province of Quebec actually has its origins with economic development money from the federal government. But that's not the point. Over the years, we've tracked tens of millions of dollars of direct subsidy to the Asbestos Institute, for one thing, which was created by the federal government to take the stink off the asbestos industry. It's failed to do so. It's the only lobby firm in the country that's funded by the government to lobby the government. But there's also the indirect money. I mean, teams of Department of Justice lawyers are like globe-trotting propagandists for the asbestos industry. They go everywhere to promote the asbestos industry, to defend the industry, and to block international efforts to curb its use, like the Rotterdam Convention, which is coming up again. For years, I've been there. I go to these things, and there'll be 20 civil servants from the Department of Justice and Department of Natural Resources sabotaging the Rotterdam Convention, which is only a list that lists hazardous materials that requires informed prior consent to trade. It doesn't ban chemicals. It only requires that you tell the customer that it's harmful and to take health and safety protocols. So, I mean, and the money we spend at our foreign embassies, they brag that 160 trade junkets in 60 different countries, paid for by the Government of Canada using our foreign embassies and our trade commissioners in foreign countries. No other commodity in Canada enjoys the level of government support as asbestos. Not wheat, not softwood lumber, potash, nothing. Asbestos it's on a pedestal. And so they're pushing it like crazy. As developed nations ban asbestos, they're aggressively finding new markets to sell asbestos in an unprecedented way.